Okay, welcome back everyone. It's 10/8 of 2015. We're going to continue on with the Summa Theologiae by Thomas Aquinas. We're going to take a look at Eschatology, which is a natural place to go after just finishing Phronesis and practical Christianity. Now we'll take a look at the eschatological goal of practical Christianity. And we're going to look at it in 7 moments. We're going to begin with the idea of the last end in itself. And the nature of our last end, according to Thomas, the object is the good. It is inaugurated through the eschatological appetite, or the appetite of the will. It is imaginary in nature and not rigidly fixed by any kind of a conceptual reason. It's not rigidly fixed. We just form a near approximation of essence. We never get a perfect capture of divine essence. Now, the movement of agency is inaugurated by the faculty of reason. The rational appetite supplies the ideal form for the movement of the act of existence. Now, the rational appetite is the appetite of the will informed by reason, and the role of the faculty of reason is to articulate the universal ordained end as understood from God as the principal agent. And so it's about ordaining the truth. It's an ordained truth for Thomas Aquinas. The universal truth from God is an ordained truth, ordained to completion. It is ordained to the fulfillment of the kingdom. It is an ordained truth. Now, the appetite of will influences the act of existence because positing is itself actualizing. And the act will include the principle of the posited intent, and the terminus as the passion and the emotional conviction for the eschatological trajectory of that which we posit. And so in the first moment, we're just kind of looking at last end as a concept within itself. We end up with the triad within the chart, and it basically looks like a 3-point process of ordained truth, which we arrive at through the faculty of reason, which articulates the universal ordained end of God's kingdom, the ordained truth. From there we move on to the posited good, so it's ordained truth and posited good. Now the posited good employs the appetite of the will, and it generates a species of a very specific praxis form to be enacted in our own historical reality. So it's very praxis specific. And then we take that ordained truth and that posited historical praxis, we combine those to form an act of existence, which takes up that posited specific form and couples it with the passionate conviction that we carry in our motivational base. And by adding that passionate conviction to the praxis form, we will automatically perform the act of existence. So it's ordained truth, posited good as praxis, and then active existence coupled with our motivation of conviction. And from there we'll look at the last end as going out of itself, and Thomas Aquinas says there are 4 principles of realization. There is the principle of unity. There can only be one ordained end as a genus. There's one ordained end of God's kingdom. The virtue of eschatological end remains in the unconscious, even when we're not really fully pulling it forward in consciousness. If we are imprinted with that divinity of Jesus Christ, we will carry that virtue of the eschatological end even in our unconscious when we're not calling it up all the time. So we have kind of a latent force that we can call up. Now there is a universality of end with regard to considering it formally, but it is individualized with regard to realizing that universal end. So there's one universal formal end, but different subjects will realize it in their own specific way. Now, correspondence and intersubjectivity exist between only those who are authentically rational and truly take up the contemplative, rational nature of contemplating the divinity of God. And that contemplative, intellective soul is the divine aspect of our soul. It's that contemplative, intellective soul that will be authentic in taking up this work of ordained truth and ordained vision. Before Thomas Aquinas moves on to discussing the actual positing of the good, he wants to offer up a little bit of a critique of false ideas of happiness, finite happiness, and how it needs to be critiqued. And basically, he says that wealth thrives in giving rather than in hoarding, so we need to redefine the value of health. Honor is really to offer deference to another to be honored. And fame, well, our beatitude equals the glory which we enjoy in God, in God's divinity. That's the only glory we seek. We don't seek any finite fame. Power, the good use of power, equals virtue. And then bodily good, all of the bodily goods are ordained to the good of the soul and the intentionality of the soul, which is that part of our soul that is imprinted with the divine. And finite pleasure is not the essence of good. It's only an accident which needs to be directed by the intellect of soul. Now, the good inherent in the soul equals the participated good. It's to the depth that we participate in the divinity of God. That'll be the strength of our soul in its imprint of Christ. So basically, Thomas Aquinas wants to redefine all of these finite aspects of happiness, and he says the object of the appetite of the will is a universal good, not a finite created good. It's the universal good based on the universal true, which is ascertained by the intellect of soul. So it's universal good that we strive for, which is the kingdom of God, and that's informed by the universal truth, which we acquire through the intellect of soul. And so that kind of gives us a general idea of what he means by the eschatological end, discussed as a concept. So how do we get practical with that? Since we just finished the doctrine of phronesis, how do we posit this truth as a good to be realized in history? And that'll take us to the realm of spirit, which is going to be 5, 6, and 7. Now in block 5, happiness as eschatological operation. So Thomas Aquinas calls the process of positing the good as an operation, eschatological operation of the last end. And there are 8 aspects. The good is created in that it is the operation of attainment, and it is the operation of form within matter. So it is the ideal form that we shape into a praxis form, and it's that praxis form that becomes an operation of form within matter. It's essentially intellective as the unity of mind with God. So it's essentially, it begins with the intellect of soul, which gets pushed toward the appetite of the will through the inherent attribute of love, of agape love. Now, knowledge, we delight in the operation of the will, but for the perfect happiness, which is the knowledge of God. Our ultimate goal is to seek the perfect knowledge of God. It is speculative. That's the highest operation that we're involved in, is this speculative work of the vision of the divine. It is the contemplating of the divine. The secular sciences can be referenced, but only with regard to act. They're not really to be referenced as far as speculative truth. They are merely referenced with regard to like act or means. Substance, this is an operation of being, that is the absolute being of God, which encloses all beings, small lowercase. So all enclosed beings are beings by participation in the one absolute being of God. Now vision, 1 John 3:2 says we shall be like him because we shall see him as he is. So the perfect happiness equals our vision of the divine essence, which Thomas Aquinas says we can never acquire perfectly. Our vision of divine essence is something that we are in an operative process of attaining. It's an operation of attainment, and we approximate it as best we can. We form the perfect good as best we can in our vision, and in our praxis positing, but we can never become rigidly fixed in that apprehension because it's beyond human conceptualization. And that moves us into the realm of the spirit proper, which is box 6, where we realize that praxis form that we formed. And he gives us 8 aspects. There is within the realm of spirit, there will be the delight of return, which is essential in that the previous actualizations provide feedback to the appetite of the will, which in turn revises the ordained reason. That ordained ideal truth gets revised through feedback. Vision in the realm of spirit, vision equals the rational ideal end, imaginatively formed along with the self's passionate conviction. Remember, in order to turn it into a praxis for positing in history, it gets coupled with emotion. It gets coupled with conviction and our motivational base. So it's not just the rational or the intellective, it's the intellective plus the motivational. In order for it to become a praxis positing and acting itself in history, it must be coupled with the emotive and emotional motivational base of conviction. So we do have that vision, but it's vision coupled with conviction. Now, comprehension in the realm of spirit, it's the apprehension that equals the comprehending of that which is the present opportunity for positing, which is based on kind of a near understanding or an epignosis, an approximation of essence of the last end that we hold in vision. So we take that approximate end, we apply it to history, and comprehension comprehends the place of emergence in history where we want to enact our act of existence. It identifies the praxis moment. Now, rectitude is a subconcept of comprehension, and it simply means to put the elements in order that will make up the very historical praxis positing. It means to put all of the elements in their proper order to form a praxis model of positing. Now, eistasis phantasm for Thomas Aquinas means that this vision, it's a subconcept of vision, this vision is imaginative. It's not rigidly fixed in reason because it's coupled with imagination, and which is phantasm, and aesthetics or eistasis. And so it's creatively open all the time to revision because it employs the imagination for positing. We do need community, we do need dialogue in order to refine the end, and in order to refine our comprehension of ethical order for the praxis positing. And it is a virtuous act because we actualize the contemplative virtue of vision, and we actualize the active virtue of praxis comprehension. And so we have a mini-triad here also in the realm of spirit of contemplative virtue as vision, as that epignosis plus imaginative conviction, coupled with active virtue as a praxis comprehension, as the rectitude of shaping a praxis form, and then the actual virtuous act through community and dialogue plus the delight of return for refinement. So we get a little mini triad within the realm of spirit. That puts us into block 7 on attainment, and it just kind of wraps up things by saying that happiness or blessedness is the attainment of the perfect good, which is our perfect knowledge of God. There are diverse degrees of happiness, but the happiness of our salvation cannot ever be lost. It is preserved, and final happiness surpasses the intellect and surpasses the will. We can never have it rigidly fixed in our minds. It's always open creatively for revision and future understanding. And the works of spirit are going to be works of rectitude, meaning the virtuous act of keeping all of our action in alignment with the eschatological end of God's kingdom. Align ourselves with the kingdom in every act and keep all the elements of our praxis positing in their proper ethical order. And so Thomas Aquinas takes us through his essential first model of telling us that we're going to move when we work, when we're involved in the kingdom of God in an eschatological way, being involved in that trajectory of spirit, we're going to be forming a vision of the divine as ordained truth. It's going to be a universal, absolute ordained truth that we're going to hold in our long-term memory as a foundational truth that is ordained to completion and ordained to fulfillment. But then we're going to evaluate our history. We're going to evaluate what's needed to be done in history. And we're going to want to form a posited praxis good that can take that universal ordained truth and make it applicable to the emerging good that's on the very horizon of emerging. And that'll be the appetite of the will. Will generate that praxis form that will drive our act of existence. But the act of existence becomes an act because it becomes passionate. It's not just intellectual. It becomes passionate because it takes up our motivational base, which is very emotional, and we couple that with our knowledge, so knowledge plus emotion creates action. And then he showed us that basically all 8 of the aspects of finite happiness are truly, they fall short of the divine good. And when we get down to really positing the divine good, it's going to be an eschatological operation, always based on the trajectory and the alignment with the kingdom, which is the last final end, God's kingdom. And it will be created. It's created in the Spirit. It will work out of a very praxis form that is based on that vision of the truth that's ordained. It will be primarily intellective, but it also will take up the emotional and the motivational when it becomes act. So it is knowledge, of course. It is the knowledge of God which we seek, but it is highly speculative, which transitions to becoming very practical as a phronesis in the appetite of the will. We can employ secular sciences as a means, but not as an end in themselves. There's one universal substance, the being of God, and he encloses all lowercase beings. They're all enclosed within the absolute being of God. But everything boils down to seeking that vision of divine essence, which is going to be a progressive operation for us in the realm of spirit. And in the realm of spirit, we learn that it's all about virtue. It's all about the operation of virtue. It's contemplative virtue, which means refine our contemplation, our meditation on God's essence and what that ordained truth means for our kingdom, the kingdom of God on earth and in heaven. So it's a contemplative virtue that we first take up, which is very meditative. But then we enact it through phronesis and practical Christianity. And in active virtue, we form a praxis comprehension based on the intellective meditation. So we take the intellective meditation, we form it into praxis comprehension with a rectitude of ordering all the elements in a very practical way. And then through that rectitude of ordering all the elements in an ethical and practical way, we're ready for a true virtuous act, which takes up the church, it takes up community, it takes up fellowship, it takes up dialogue, so we can get a better understanding of what God's kingdom is eschatologically aimed toward, and what the fulfillment looks like for our history and our specific time and place. And so if you look at the little middle chart there in the middle, you've got that act of existence as the passionate conviction, which is added to the praxis form. And that larger circle encloses the ordained truth of reason, which articulated the universal end, and the posited good of the will, which generated a very specific praxis form. So